Look at a typical small town. The skyline is flat, muted, predictable. But for a kid named Arav, the reality of the streets didn't match the scale of the sky above him. He had an obsessive, singular thought. He was going to shine like those stars. When you voice a massive goal out loud, the immediate response is rarely applause. Arav was met with direct commands to step back in line. People laughed at him. They told him his goals were impossible and instructed him to stop looking up and start being realistic. That mockery isn't random cruelty. It operates as a strict societal defense mechanism. When a group establishes a comfortable norm, any individual reaching beyond it threatens that baseline. The crowd suppresses the outlier to protect the status quo. Therefore, if you launch a grand ambition and encounter zero resistance, you are likely aiming too low. True ambition triggers immediate environmental friction. Arav isn't an anomaly. Every day, millions of people look up, feel a surge of inspiration, and set aggressive, towering intentions for themselves. But look at this funnel chart tracking the life cycle of those intentions. We start with a massive input of aspirations at the top, which rapidly bottlenecks into a tiny output of executions. The massive drop-off happens right here, at the choke point of societal friction. The moment the crowd pushes back, the overwhelming majority surrender, which leaves us with a mechanical problem. What exact psychological variable allows that tiny sliver of people at the bottom to push through the choke point while everyone else gives up? Surviving that drop-off requires dismantling how you process feedback. You must deliberately reprogram the way you interpret the external world. Arav solved this early on. He made a conscious decision that the loudest, authoritative voice directing his life had to come from inside his own head, effectively turning down the volume on the entire town. We can model this using an internal versus external validation framework. This diagram shows two side-by-side feedback loops. Focus on the external loop on the left. It relies on a shifting cluster of nodes representing the crowd. Because public opinion is constantly changing, this cycle is broken and highly erratic. Building a long-term goal on this makes your trajectory completely fragile. Now watch the external loop disappear. We are left with the internal validation loop. This system is mechanically superior because it relies entirely on self-generated metrics. It creates a closed, unbreakable circuit powered by a single, stable source. Filtering out the crowd isn't about arrogance. It is a calculated transfer of authority. You revoke the environment's permission to judge your progress, handing that power strictly to yourself. Once that internal loop is set, you enter the longest, most difficult phase of the process, the invisible, deeply unglamorous daily grind. This phase is characterized by sheer exhaustion. You put in the work every day, the resistance feels immovable, and eventually, quitting sounds highly logical. This is the psychological danger zone. You pour massive energy into the system, but the external world reflects zero visible results. Arav developed a specific mental framing device for this exact deficit. When he wanted to quit, he reminded himself, stars also shine only in the dark. He weaponized his own isolation. By defining the dark, the adversity, the total lack of support, the mockery, as a mandatory prerequisite for shining, he stopped feeling punished by it. It was simply the required operating condition. True execution is never about riding a continuous wave of high motivation. It is the clinical, repetitive persistence through long periods where progress is invisible to everyone else. But if that internal loop holds, time eventually forces a tipping point. The months of incremental, unseen effort finally cross a mathematical threshold and compound into undeniable, highly visible results. And then the environment inverts. The exact same crowd that laughed at Arav, the people who provided the initial friction, are suddenly standing around clapping for him. The mechanics of this shift are highly predictable. The crowd did not suddenly adopt a new supportive philosophy on ambition. They simply had no choice. The sheer physical weight of Arav's executed reality forced them into alignment. External validation does arrive eventually, but it is strictly a lagging indicator of internal execution. it never leads. Which brings us to the brutal, final truth of Arav's journey. Looking at the sky and possessing a beautiful dream did not make him special. As this graphic lays out, the defining variable is the relentless, often miserable execution of that vision. Dreamers and doers are separated by a permanent, rigid line of action. When Arav returned to that roof, the equation was complete. True luminescence is not reflecting the light of the people around you. It is generating your own through sheer force of will, one day at a time.